Well, hey, everybody, welcome into the NG podcast where we talk to the next generation about being the next generation. I am your host, Pastor Tim. We got Manny back there behind the Manny cam, and our very first ever remote guest, virtual guest, coming to us all the way from the beautiful metropolis that is Fort Worth, Texas. That's where I believe. Is that where you're at right now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, it's summer. So, but this is Coleman Maxwell, one of the coolest humans on the planet, and I don't say that lightly. I mean that genuinely. One of the coolest people I've ever met. But Coleman, how are you doing?
Man, I'm doing well, man. Just fully into this Texas summer. We are in the digits all week, and so I am sweating pork and beans when I'm out in the sun.
Same here, dude. You're talking to a bunch of people out in the desert. I think we hit 107 the other day, but you get humidity, right? You guys have humidity out there?
We do. Yes, sir.
Yeah. See, that's the worst. So triple digits with just so all of you desert people that are listening realize you think that triple digits is hot. And then you put humidity in there and you understand a little bit more what the word Hades from the Bible is talking about. It's pretty bad. So, well, man, is anybody practicing out there or is everybody off pretty much for the summer?
No, man, we started summer workouts like 4 weeks ago. So we're
Gosh.
back to the grind.
Back to the grind. That is a grind, man. Yeah. Hey, I miss Fort Worth. I think the last time I was out there was 2 or 3 years ago. I got to see Baylor beat up on TCU. Or no, sorry, got to see TCU beat up on Baylor. I got to say that right. Got to see TCU beat up on Baylor. But for those of you that are listening in, Coleman, you are, correct me if I'm wrong, you're one of 3 chaplains, or you are the chaplain, or there's 2? How many are there?
There's 4 of us FCA character coaches.
Yep. Character coaches. Okay. That's awesome. And he's out there at TCU, Texas Christian University, which all of our students know I'm a very, very big fan of. Awesome. We've got some sports fans, and so this is really beneficial for sports fans. But really, the reason why I wanted Coleman, specifically you, to talk to our kids is because of your involvement with the FCA. And so I'm really excited to kind of talk about that. I mean, I think we have some kids that don't really maybe know what FCA is. And for those that do, maybe they don't know that they can actually still be involved in the FCA at the collegiate level. And so I'm really, really excited to have you on. But before we get to all of that, we had one of our former students on last week who's out there earning a premier education from Stanford University. And and the question I asked, he's going to try and get me into the student section for that game, Coleman. And I got to say, I was like, are you sure? Because I'm going to be wearing purple. And he said, no, I can get you in there. I was like, as long as you keep me from getting beat up, I'll join you. But first question I asked him is the first question I'm going to ask you. Out there in Fort Worth, if it's like, man, I'm hungry, I got to go get some grub. Coleman, where are you going? Like, what is the best grub in Fort Worth, Texas?
Man, that's such a loaded question because Fort Worth has a myriad of great food spots. But since we're in the great state of Texas, it's only right that I jump this thing off with something under the umbrella of barbecue. Amen. There is actually a newer barbecue restaurant called Ribby's.
Okay.
It is phenomenal. Their main food item on the menu is ribs. That's predominantly all they sell. So like ribs, fries, and a couple of rolls, and then you can get like a drink with it. And it is phenomenal, bro. So, I would say Ribby's. So anytime you're in Fort Worth, Texas, man, make sure you pull up the Ribby's. What's cool about it is, Texas Barbecue, Texas Monthly came out with the rankings on the best barbecue in the state of Texas. At the top of the list was this place called Goldie's Barbecue, which is amazing.
Yeah.
It's always like a 2-hour wait to get in, long line. Well, Ribby's is a branch of Goldie's. And so I like it because I'm cool with just going to Goldie's, getting the same type of quality of barbecue and not having to sit in a line for 2 hours. So
there you go. Yeah.
Just want to make sure I solidify how legit Ribby's is.
Hey, and we're not getting any sponsorship dollars from them, but maybe we can reach out to them and be like, hey, we're promoting you out here in California. I'll say, man, I miss Texas barbecue. I mean, I'd go to Rudy's, but really my favorite was Cooper's out there at the stockyards.
Good one.
Um, oh yeah, but I mean, people out here in California are confused what barbecue is. So thank you for telling us what real barbecue is. Grant, my brother, would be all for it. We're gonna have him on the podcast here in a few weeks, but he's out there making real barbecue, and he misses him some Texas barbecue. I think he goes to Salt Lick, which is out in Austin,
Okay.
Texas, and but man, so good. So then, okay, so you got to visit California recently. You want to talk
Yeah.
about why you were here?
Yeah. Why was it? Oh, yeah. So, man, I went to Los Angeles, California with my football team, the TCU football team. We made it to the last game of college football, which was the national championship. It was at the Charger Stadium. SoFi.
As SoFi,
Uh,
yeah.
yep. And yeah, that's the last time I was in California, and the first and only time I've been in California. Man, we stayed in this hotel that was literally like 90 floors, and like it was so crazy because on like the 84th floor of this uh, hotel, you can it's kind of like the tourist spot, and you can go to this big glass opening and you can see the Hollywood sign off in the distance. So, of course, all of us Texans were like, dang,
Yeah, oh yeah.
that's the Hollywood sign. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember I seeing a video of you guys, some of the teammates just grubbing on some food. So now there's that age-old debate who makes real Mexican food. Um, we would say it's us here in California, but then you've got this whole thing called Tex-Mex. But when you were in California, did you eat pretty good? And what's a memorable meal that you had out here?
Man, honestly, so we the hotel we stayed at was located in downtown Los Angeles. So we weren't allowed to leave the hotel, so everything was done in house. So the food that we ate there was phenomenal. But I don't know if it was from a specific restaurant or they
Okay.
had people just cooking for us that whole week or a couple days we were there. So
Yeah. Well, hey, I would imagine at an event like that, you weren't receiving school lunches.
no, definitely not.
If I would guess. So that's awesome, man. Well, hey, I really am excited to have you here. Our students are excited to have you here. What's funny is just a couple of years ago, I had a kid at the school that I was working for. His name was Daniel Elias, and he wants to be a college football coach. And I just kind of reached out to you. I was like, look, man, like I don't know a lot of that world other than what I see in the media. And so you did me a solid, and you just got to hop on and talk with him. And what's super cool is now he's actually going to be a guest on the show here in a few weeks because he's doing it. He's going to be coaching and getting into that world. And he actually did get the athletic, what was it? The the equipment manager. And at the time he was looking at it, they were part of the Pac-12, and now they're part of the Big 12, and it was at Arizona State. And so he's taken your advice and moving forward and all that. So I just really appreciate,
Really?
yeah, oh yeah. Yep. So you'll get to, if you want to listen in, he'll be in a few weeks with us, just a couple weeks with
That's
us. But
awesome.
yeah, and he was like, hey, do you want me to bring any players? Because I've got some sevens players that are probably going to go. They've gotten offers from such and such. I was like, no, you're good, man. We'll just get you on the show.
Yeah,
We don't have a lot of room. Yeah, we don't have a lot of room, but I'd love to have it, man. But yeah, so just thanks, Coleman, just for number one, encouraging those students that I'm connected to, but then also just for what you do. So I guess it would be awesome if you can kind of just go in depth of what it is that you do over there at TCU with the what is the FCA, and then what is it that you do with them?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, let me give a quick shout out to Daniel Elias, man. Big shout out to Daniel, aka the offensive scientist. Man, I'm excited to see you do big things, brother. Keep the Lord first and continue to score a lot of points as an offensive coordinator one day. So I'm looking forward to seeing you be the next big thing, brother. So big shout out to you. Yeah, as far as so I work for a Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and specifically, I serve on the campus of TCU amongst the athletic department there. Ultimately, FCA's big vision is to engage every coach and every athlete, and see them develop a growing relationship with Jesus, right? Under that umbrella, man, it looks different on every campus and every school, and so basically here at TCU, we do a Monday night all multi-sport huddle for all the sports um, at TCU. So we usually have anywhere from 30 to 90 students, just depending on what's
Wow.
going on. Student athletes and students as well. So that's fun. And then also, I travel with the football team. Shoot, I thought I was about to sneeze. And there it goes.
You're good. You're good, man. Hey, we all do it.
So and then so I travel with the football team, and I do a Friday night football chapel for those guys. During the week, I do a coach's Bible study. And then when basketball season is in full effect, I am serving those guys. I do all of their game day chapels, hang out at practice, hoop practice. Just like I do at football practice. So yeah, man, there's a lot going on, but ultimately there's this phrase that is important within FCA called the ministry of presence. And this is so crucial because the ministry of presence is essentially us as FCA character coaches having a servant mindset, being in the midst of whatever sport we're at, and just being present and being available, being able to serve however needed, And so the ministry of presence is so crucial. And so, man, that's kind of a synopsis of what I do as a FCA campus rep.
That's awesome. Well, I love that you mentioned ministry of presence, because sometimes, even Job was going through all of his stuff, and what did his friends do? They just came and sat with him. They didn't. It's funny that when you look at Job, it didn't go south until they started to talk. They were doing great when they were just sitting with him in silence, but then when they tried to offer advice, that's when it went south. So I love that you're there for him, and especially being a fan of college sports and really, professional sports in general. You just realize how much every time it just comes back to money lately, and there's just so much money being talked about and thrown around. And whether you've got conferences now looking at private equity or whatever it may be, it is so encouraging. Hear me, like it's really encouraging to know that even in the midst of that world where you've got people that are entertaining the thought of millions of dollars, even if not that, hundreds of thousands at least, that they still have the presence of Jesus around them. So I love that you do that. So how did you get into that? Do you want to kind of walk us through how you ended up in that?
Man, absolutely. I first started out in ministry as a young 20-year-old, and I was full-time youth ministry, Second Baptist Church in Levelland, Texas. Did that for a while, for like 3 years. And then went off and worked at a camp in Missouri called Kids Across America, which is a branch off of Kanakuk camps. And then when I came back, I actually got an opportunity to be one of the college pastors at First Baptist level. And man, God was faithful and gracious to allow that ministry to be fruitful as well. But I remember just thinking to myself one day, like, man, I'm not sure if this specific context of ministry is long-term for me. I love it. God's doing a lot. And so, man, I went up to my pastor's office and had a conversation with him, Pastor Bobby. Love that dude. I said, Pastor Bobby, man, I definitely want to chop it up with you real quick. Just thinking through what my journey looks like going forward. He said, all right, cool. So, we began to talk, and I was like, man, even though God is doing a lot, and I love collegiate ministry. I love it. It's my passion. I don't know if being on staff at a church is where I'm headed long term. He said, okay. He said, well, what are you passionate about? And I didn't really know too much about FCA, especially at the collegiate level at this time. So I said, this is how I describe what I'm passionate about. I said, Pastor Bobby, if I had a big old silver pot in front of me, and if you put biblical manhood, competition, discipleship, mentorship, my cultural swag all in there, you stir it up, pour it out. That's what I want to be doing. He said, okay. He said, well, man, let's pray together and we just see what happens. And so around that time, Mike Leach was the head football coach of Texas Tech. He ended up getting fired. They brought in a new head coach named Tommy Tuberville from Auburn. And Tommy Tuberville brought in this college football chaplain. So I didn't know this. This is really the backstory of what I'm telling you. Pastor Bobby, I guess, had some type of relationship with Steve Grant already. So Steve Grant had at some point reached out to Pastor Bobby. He was like, hey, if you have any college age males that are interested in sports ministry, then shoot them my way. I would love to have a conversation with them. Pastor Bobby was like, well, actually, I have someone on staff who is doing a phenomenal job, but he might be a better fit in your context. So Steve Grant was like, all right, we'll shoot him my way. So I went to the Texas Tech football facilities and walked into Steve Grant's office, shook his hand, had probably about a 2-hour conversation with him. And at the end of that conversation, he was like, bro, I want to bring you on here. Man, I think you're a great fit. I think you can help me serve this team well. And yeah, so man, I prayed about it. And I'll never forget my first day. I walked out there to practice, and Coach Tommy Tuberville walked up to me. His first statement to me was, how much eligibility do you have left? So he was ready to scoop me up.
There you go.
I grew up in West Texas, and Texas Tech is my first love for sure. So anyways, yeah, so that was in 2010. So I did that from 2010 to 2013, serving as an assistant football character coach for TCU's football team. Tommy Tuberville ended up leaving. And then my wife and I, at this point, began to pray like, okay, well, what's next for us? I had already discovered this is my calling, right?
Yes.
And then Megan was like, hey, like, I would love to get closer to my parents. They stay in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So, man, let's see what comes of that. So I was like, well, also, I think it would be necessary for me to just finish my degree and do it in something that I'm passionate about. So that's how I ended up at Southwestern Seminary to start out with, is because my whole plan was to finish my degree there through that seminary and then reach back out to some of the coaches that I was on staff with at Texas Tech and see if there's any opens to be like the football chaplain at whatever school they may be. So I wasn't even thinking about TCU. Well, one of the co-offensive coordinators at Texas Tech ended up getting hired by Coach Patterson at TCU in 2013. And he had ran into the college football character coach, head college football character coach for TCU. And he was like, hey, have you heard of Coleman Maxwell? And he was like, no, I haven't. And he's like, man, well, he had a major impact on our guys at Texas Tech. I at least just want y'all to meet. So Chauncey Franks reached out to me on social media. We met up, kind of the same deal. We had about an hour and a half conversation. And he's like, man, I want to bring you on. And I told him no, because I wasn't thinking anything about TCU at all. Like, I was like, bro, like, I'm a Texas Tech Red Raider through and through. So, yeah, there's that, right? And so I remember going home, telling my wife, and my wife was like, are you crazy? Like, I was like, babe, like, I feel like I haven't put my time in. I don't know. So what's so funny is the next day I get a call from my pastor at the church that we had started going to here in Fort Worth. And he said, hey, man, Chauncey just called me and told me that you turned down the opportunity that he presented. So you might want to revisit that opportunity. And I was like, wait, Chauncey snitched on me? Like, what is it? Who is that guy? Right? Anyways, so Megan was laughing at me because she was like, yeah, babe, I don't understand why you even denied that from the get-go. It's who you are. It's your calling. And I was like, yeah, maybe I'll just panic. Maybe I don't know, I'm trying to control the scenario, and that's why I said no. So anyways, I called Chauncey back. we talk again, and kind of the same deal. I got to TCU's campus August of 2014, and that's when he officially hired me, and I fell in love with everything about TCU, and so I truly bleed purple now. And so yeah, August of 2014 was my start date. So it's crazy. I'm coming up on
Coming
10
up on
years.
10 years. Man.
Wow.
Hey.
But I ended
Well,
up
hey,
finishing my education fully online at Midwestern Seminary. So
there you
big
go.
shout out to
Hey,
Spurgeon College, man. So,
there you go. Yeah, my wife almost went there actually. So, and I got to meet you, spend a little bit of life with you at Southwestern. Lots of long study sessions that probably didn't need to be that long. They just ended up being that long. But
bro, it was
but no.
perfect. If it wasn't for you, I probably would have failed some of those classes. So thank you, Tim. Thank you, big
Hey,
dog.
hey, man, it's a pleasure, and it's so great having you on our show, and just getting to hear that story because we've got everything. I mean, our students are athletes. I mean, we've got fighters, some people that are in jiu-jitsu. We've got some football players. We've got basketball players. I mean, Manny is a basketball player.
Awesome.
His brother's a basketball player. But then we've also got some kids that are they're involved in showmanship and band and things like that. And so it's good to hear, you know, because no matter what your specialty is, and just like you said, when you're good at something, it can lead to great things. But that's also a lot of responsibility. So I appreciate you sharing that story. So let me ask this: what have over the last 10 years, you know, that you've been doing this? What's tough about it, and what's great about it? Because I mean, ministry's tough, you know.
Yeah, man.
And so especially if we have some people considering, you know, and let me go back to say this. I love that you started with calling. I love that you're like, look, man, I don't know what it is. Like, it wasn't like, no, I'm going to be a football chaplain. Like, I love that you were like, nope, if it's these things, this is what I'm good at. This is what I'm called to. I don't know what that is. And then it just all of a sudden aligned. I love that you started there. And for our listeners, man, that's where you need to start. You don't get to pick sometimes where God leads you, but you know what he gifted you in. And so thank you so much for clarifying that. But ministry's tough. And so what are some things that are tough about it? We'll start with the bad, right? And then what are some things that make it worth all of that?
Absolutely, man. I think for me specifically, the fundraising aspect, although I'm doing great in that, having to constantly be in this sports missionary mindset is can sometimes be a daunting task, but it's really only a daunting task when I start to want to control it myself, right? You know, so but ultimately, I'm always reminded that when you are on mission for God, He provides Jehovah Jireh, right? And so in this ministry, as FCA reps, we have to raise our funds, and so what I've learned is to invite people to be a part of the story that God is writing amongst TCU athletics. Inviting them to be a part of the story from a fiscal perspective, right? From a financial perspective, and how it is important for me to lean on the body of Christ for things like that, because God has provided people with those type of resources to help the mission go forward. And so I would say that over the course of the time, it's gotten exponentially easier, but it is still the scenario that I have to be mindful of and continually cultivate.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think everybody would agree that ministry is expensive, right? Unfortunately, ministry costs money, and you know, that's how the world works. But I mean, when you think about being in the room, and we actually just recently talked about that with our youth group. I just talked to Alejandro last week about that. Very few people can be in the room that you're in, right? Especially for him, you know, how difficult it is to get into a school like that for you, how difficult and rare it is to be where you are. When you finally get somebody in the room, you know, whether it's Esther being in the room with the king, or it's Joseph being in the room with Pharaoh, like, that is very rare. And so you want to make sure that you invest in those people that have that opportunity, because it's important, because of the impact that you're having on people. You know, not everybody goes pro, but still there's always that pressure. and making sure that the gospel is still being proclaimed even in rooms like that are hard to access. And so, man, what makes all of that? I mean, when it comes to long nights and not knowing where the bills are going to come from and those kinds of things, what is it that makes it worth it?
Yeah, man. The fact that when you lean not on your own understanding, but God's understanding, as Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 talks about, man, you can just get to see how God sets you up for eternal success, right? Kingdom success. And so, man, the opportunity to lean on God's understanding as opposed to my own is so rewarding, man. And because He is so clear and intentional about what He is doing, not only in my life, but many Christians' life across this globe, right? And so He is trustworthy, and He is the cornerstone, and it's easy to stand on that type of foundation. So it
Hmm.
allows me to be on campus and to be amongst the athletes and to do ministry in various ways, knowing that God is in control.
Yeah, I love it. Are there any, and you can think on this if we need to circle back to it, but are there any stories just in your last 10 years of impact that have kind of come to mind?
Yes, a resounding yes. Just last weekend, bro. Last weekend was a full circle moment for me, man. Like I said, I've
Oh,
been in this thing almost 10 years. And last weekend was my second wedding to officiate a former TCU football player's wedding. So, man, a guy that I've been mentoring and discipling since his freshman year as a TCU football player. He graduated in like 2021. Um, and yeah, he has found the one of whom his soul truly loves. And he
mm,
asked me to officiate his wedding. And because of the impact that I had on his life. And so, yeah, man, those moments are humbling, full circle moments for me. And so, yeah, that's a major impact story that just happened last weekend, June 22nd, big dog.
dude, that's awesome. Hey, that's big. I mean, if somebody invites you to do their wedding, man, that's pretty special, right there. I just got my first one actually. First time anybody has asked me to do that, and man, it's an honor. You're right, it's a huge honor. So, dude, that's awesome. So, I want to kind of transition here, because we have youth ministry, as you know, you've had experience, but you kind of ride the wave, right? So,
Yeah,
um, your youth group all of a sudden, like, it'll get high school heavy, and then they all start to graduate, and it kind of shifts back toward that middle school heavy. And
yeah.
so we're kind of in that transition of, like, we're pretty high school heavy, but then here pretty soon it's going to transition a lot. So I've got to get those burp jokes and fart jokes and all that stuff ready again, as we
Yeah,
raise up those
absolutely.
middle schoolers. But as we've got a lot of high schoolers, we just talked about recently the turnover just in the next 2 years, how many of our students are entering into the college world or career
Yeah.
world. And so let me ask you, for someone that's in college ministry, what are you noticing about teenagers that are teenage Christians specifically? Good things and bad, yeah. Because again, we want to make sure we're making them aware. But what do you notice as you see students step into their freshman year? What do you notice about teenage Christians entering into that next phase of life?
Man, that's a great question, man. Generation Z, man, is complex, man. Just like probably every other generation before them, right? Our generation for us, but Generation Z, inevitably is tied to social media, all right. And so I think what makes teenage Christians in this current era, 2024, right? What makes it difficult for them to thrive is most of them uh, have grown up with technology and social media. And so comparing themselves to other people or, just running to social media or technology for temporary type of satisfaction, right? So they have it really hard because in the college football world, Generation Z or whatever generation we're currently dealing with right now, um, they they can build their own entourage on social media and have their own group of people who tell them what they want to hear. Um, and also, there is a group of people that will also tear them down. And so they're constantly tied to that. And so that's what makes it difficult for teens going into college now to thrive is y'all are going into college with social media breathing down your back, social media and technology. So I would say
Mhm.
that as from my perspective, that's the number one thing that makes it difficult for Christian teens going into college in this current era.
Yeah. So, and I think we see that here too. Just that. I mean, we're doing a series with our girls, and the series is all on depression, and the biblical response to that, where it comes from. Because again, this generation for sure struggles a lot with anxiety and depression from comparison, and it's sad, but it's so many things are even tied to social media these days, that it seems like you can't go grocery shopping without being asked to follow us on Instagram or whatever it may be. It's just so much a part of the culture. So, but based on that, for you, what advice do you have for students, especially athletes? As we have some
Yeah.
that are very gifted athletes, but really students in general, so that they can continue to grow and move as they go into that higher level of education or maybe even higher level of sports.
Man, that's a dope question, brother. Man, so last fall we did a series. We did like a 5-week series called Audience of One. And the premise was, how do you live and compete for an audience of one? Being and that audience being Jesus, right? Because
Hmm.
Jesus is truly the only one that can satisfy your soul. So if that's the case, then as an athlete, you have the luxury and the privilege of competing for God's competing to bring God glory, and you don't have to be tied down by finding approval from your coaches or or likes from people on social media. If you're living and competing for an audience of one, and trying to do what Colossians 3:23 says, whatever you do, whether you eat or sleep, do it all for the glory of the Lord. Man, if you got that perspective, man, it allows you to not be bound by approval of other humans or coaches, or likes or dislikes from people on social media. So stewarding your relationship with Jesus and understanding that you were truly living and competing for an audience of one, Jesus,
Hmm.
and bringing Him
I love
glory.
that. I love that. Yeah, because I mean, and especially it seems like I heard somebody say something along the lines of, it seems like every famous person loves God when they're winning. You know,
Yep.
um, when they score the touchdown, when they win the award, you got that quick point to the sky or whatever it may be. When your life doesn't match, the way you're living your life doesn't match that, and so it can be a lot of pressure to just be genuine. When we think about athletes, I do think about people like Malik Willis from Liberty, who you could just tell they have a genuine faith, just
Yeah.
people that, heck, whether you like them or not, Tim Tebow, or just those
Yeah.
people that are rare, the people whose faith is, you
Right.
can tell it's genuine. It's not a part of their facade that's going to try and get them more followers or whatever. That's tough. It's a lot of pressure, I'm sure, that I've never been faced with really. But yeah, it can consume you. It really can, and it's easy. I love that you talked about how people today are using social media to build their own world, right? And
Mhm.
get all the approval and unfortunately disapproval from whoever in that world, and um, make your own fame, I guess, so to speak. So, um, no, I appreciate that. So, we have students that are involved in a couple of. I haven't heard of any of our students involved in FCA, but for example, we have a school here. It is Oak Hills, Oak Hills High School, and they have Bulldog Believers. I know that there's the Christian Club, which is over at Academy of hold on, let me get it right. Academy of Academic Excellence, AAE. Very much a lot of ROTC kids, that kind of stuff. So when we think of whether it's FCA or Bulldog Believers or Christian Club or whatever it may be, why is it so important for these kids, whether they're currently in school or moving on to college, why is it so important on campus to be involved in an organization or in a club like that?
Man, great question, Tim. And I single-handedly believe why Christian community is so important, whether it's FCA or Bulldog believers or whatever the platform may be. The reason why it's important is because of this. In John 10:10, Jesus says, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy, right? So if that is the thief's mission for us as Christians, then it makes sense that he would definitely want us to be isolated from Christian community, right? Because if we're isolated, then he can accuse us of false lies and tempt us in a way that we may not be able to come back from because we don't have a community around us that can help us navigate whatever we're dealing with, right? The second part of that verse, Jesus says, but I have come to give life and to give it abundantly. Well, part of that comes through Christian community, right? In Hebrews, the author says, encourage one another daily while it is called today, to keep each other from the deceitfulness of sin, right? And so, man, I would say that's why it's important to get involved in these Christian groups that are gospel centered, because they allow you to be in Christian community and be amongst like-minded brothers and sisters in Christ who can help you grow and be sanctified, and all of the above that God calls us to as it pertains to being in community as Christians. So.
Yeah, no, I love it. Well, and the reality, just coming from a youth pastor, not many of us can be on campus, right? It's especially in California. It's becoming so hard for pastors to be present. I mean, I remember when I lived in Missouri, I could literally just walk on to campus. I'd sign in, they'd give me my tag, and I could have lunch with my students. But especially not here. And so, in a place where you are hearing the world's lies more often than not, we talk about if you come to Wednesday and Sunday, you hear 2% of your week. Well, that other 98% is being influenced by something, and most of the time at your school, it's not the gospel. And so, if it's hard for me to get on campus, you've got to find that Christian community somewhere. And we've got great stories, man. We have stories of students meeting up with each other every day before school to pray at the pole. We had, one of our former co-hosts on this show. Now he's actually in the academy to become a sheriff, but just dealing with the pressure of his very first semi-pro, professional fight, MMA fight, and just how do you handle that sport, but then also winning? I think he won in 42 seconds or 49 seconds or something like that. And really, it was I would tell him, like, it's the way you handle the win. And and the way you handle that pressure. And he did a lot of great things. Instead of knocking the dude out, he tapped him out to save his dignity. Instead of jumping up for joy and cheering, he helped the guy up and hugged him and literally knelt down in the middle of the ring and prayed. And again, it's all about how you manage that. But really, you cannot put your entire spiritual life on the 2% of the time that you're in church. Because there's another 98% that's knocking on that door saying something, and it's loud. Their voice is loud. So, well, Coleman, I cannot say thank you enough for being on here with us, man. And I could sit here and talk with you for hours to just to get to pick your brain and just hear stories. Just the things that you get to see every day. And the people that you get to talk to, you are one of the few that gets to be in the room. And so we'll continue to pray for you here, that you can stay in that room, and that you can continue to influence people for Jesus as they go off and do big stuff, and that God would continue to use you in all of those things. Manny, did you have any parting questions or anything like that for Coleman?
No, I was just going to say that's really good. Just like I think I said this in one of the other podcasts, it's easy for us as athletes to kind of get very prideful, and then we make that distinction between prideful and godly confidence, and athletes really need that, especially when you have Coleman Maxwell here as somebody to be able to help them differentiate that, that really helps athletes, and they need that shoulder to be able to realize that, because it's easy to get blinded as an athlete, and so to have people like him be able to guide them that way, be there, like you said, that presence, it's really awesome.
Appreciate you, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the people listening, God can use you too. If you listen to Coleman's story, rewind it and go back and listen to his story. This was not something where he was like, well, when I turned 2, I met a college chaplain and I said, that's what I'm going to be. And I built my own name. No, it was so much about, I love your story because there's so many, it just so happens. It just so happened that this guy moved to here, and it just so happened that this guy knew this guy. And man, there's no it just so happened. God knew exactly where you were going to go. And for our listeners, God knows exactly where he's going to put you. Ephesians 2:10, he's prepared works beforehand that you might walk on them. He knows what he's got for you. So just continue to walk in that. And so Coleman, great job just continuing to walk and take the opportunities when they come. And I love that you kind of pulled a Jonah, man. God was like, I want you to go to TCU. And you're like, no, that's Nineveh. I can't go over there. And he's like, I'm going to send this big fish called your wife, and she's going to give you a hard time about going over there. And there you are. So we'll say for you, we'll say Recum Tech. I can't believe I'm saying that online, but we'll say Recum for you. And
it's Go Frogs, dog. We in this thing, for sure.
We're in it, yeah. Riff Ram, but hey, we love you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. And if we ever have any other questions come from our students, we'll send them your way. We didn't get the opportunity to do a mailbag. Just so you know, our church is in a sabbatical right now. Just kind of letting our volunteers take that season of rest before we return in August. And but normally we would do a mailbag. So maybe we'll have you back on here as the kids watch this. Maybe they'll have some questions for you. So maybe we'll try and get you back on here to do a little bit of a mailbag with our kids. But yeah, thank you so much, man.
Yeah, man. And, I'll tell you kids, follow TCU FCA on Instagram and just kind of keep up with us and kind of see what we got going on down here at TCU. So, yes, sir.
Yep. Yeah. And any school that you're at, look for, and hey, if you don't have an FCA, if you don't have a club at your school, start one. Go to your school, find that sponsoring teacher and start it. It's valuable. But yeah, we'll tag TCU FCA down at the bottom. Make sure you follow them just to continue to see the stories of impact as you continue to pray for Coleman. So awesome, man. Well, thank you so much again, brother.
Hey, so good to see you, Tim, Emmanuel. Good to meet you, bro. Love you guys. Love what y'all are doing through this podcast platform. Keep your foot on the gas, big dogs.
Yeah, for sure, man. We'll talk to you later.